Every now in history, there are certain people who change the way we view different vocations within the life of the church. And sometimes we sort of take things for granted, are lived out in different particular ways. But sometimes we don't necessarily always know the history as to how that all happened. Today we celebrate the memorial of St. John Francis de Chantal, lived in the 15th and 16th century. And she became the foundress of the Sisters of the Visitation. At that time in history, most religious orders, especially of nuns, stayed within their convents or their monasteries. They lived very contemplative lives. And they were somewhat exclusive in the way they selected their nuns at times as well. But today's saint lived a fascinating life. At the age of 28, she had 6 children, and then her husband died in a shooting accident. He was out doing sport shooting at the time, and they were using some new weapons that had been invented, and something backfired and he died, leaving her with 6 children at the age of 28. And she had some great bitterness in her life for quite a period of time. And she felt very angry at many people. And she talked to a few different people, and she came across a guy by the name of St. Francis de Sales, who then became her spiritual director, who reminded her that despite the fact that she's had a very difficult situation, she's called to be a saint, and she's called to holiness in the midst of her own life. And so she became a mother. She took on that responsibility of looking after her children with the assistance of a few others. And as her children became older, she felt a call to continue to serve the Lord in a life of prayer, but also a life of service. And there wasn't really any particular religious order that would take in someone in their 40s at that time. Most of the religious orders of women were looking for women in their maybe 15, 16-year-olds who were committed to living a life of contemplation. But she wanted, in the emergence of cities in France, to be an instrument of prayer, of sanctity, but also of service. And she was a service of sick, especially to the sick. Hence why they were called the order of the Visitation. She visited people. And that became what the order was about. And then the order, interestingly, became the order that would take in basically a lot of the other women who were rejected by the other orders because they were a little bit older, or they'd had a little bit of a difficulty here or there in their life, or perhaps they were too sickly. She would take them in. She said, no, every person's called to sanctity. It's not just a particular small group of people. Every single person's called to sanctity. And the life, especially of religious, especially the religious of the Visitation Sisters, was to be both prayerful, but also to be active in the world. And most religious orders today have both of those elements. They're prayerful, but they're also active. St. John Francis de Chantal went on to be she was then guided by another spiritual director who we all probably know as well, St. Vincent de Paul, guided the formation of the Visitation Sisters. And they did great work, and they continue to do great work in different parts of the world today. A lot of this we take for granted today. Visitation is part of what it means to be a Christian. And we should be doing that in the ways that we can at this time, even with our distancing, to visit people, to encourage people, to encourage the sick, to encourage the dying. So today let us be inspired by the life of St. John Francis de Chantal. Let us know that we're called to be saints in the midst of our own life as well. We're called to be prayerful, but we're also called to be active in our world today. St. John Francis de Chantal, pray for us.